1999's The Matrix, there is a scene where Cypher, the pilot of the Nebuchadnezzar, meets with Agent Smith inside the simulated land of bits and bytes, discussing an agreement whereby, in exchange for betraying his human comrades to the machines, Cypher will get plugged back into the Matrix. And what is Cypher's thesis statement, his purpose for turning traitor on his own kind?
Ignorance is bliss.
Roll credits! That quote is attributed to the pre-imperial Roman poet Publilius Cyrus in the original Latin, in nul sapiendo vita jucundissima est. He was born a slave, but after winning his freedom wrote and acted in plays, at one point winning an award from Julius Caesar himself. He was rather full of pithy sayings, the Benjamin Franklin of his day, coining such bangers as honor amongst thieves, least said soonest mended, and the ever-popular, the end justifies the means. The first attribution of the modern phrase in English comes from Thomas Gray, who wrote in the final stanza of his poem Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College, "To each his sufferings all are men, condemned alike to groan, the tender for another's pain than feeling for his own. Yet why should they know their fate, since sorrow never comes too late, and happiness too swiftly flies? Thought would destroy their paradise, no more, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise." Presumably in 1742, bliss and paradise rhymed. In context, the poem yearns for a simpler time when the author was at school, arguing to let children be kept naive of the greater troubles of life and let them live in innocence and simple pleasures a little while longer. Yet the phrase ignorance is bliss and its concomitant philosophy are no longer applied solely to the innocence of childhood. It is extended, bloated, to cover a wider range of the human lifespan. 'Tis better to ignore the evils of the world and live your life with your fingers in your ears. There is a musical by Jerry Herman, the creator of Hello Dolly, called Dear World, which is little remembered now and more seldomly performed, wherein an old woman living in Paris is informed that some greedy oil barons have discovered black gold under her apartment and want to demolish the building to get at it. In response to her friends telling her that, "Girl, the world fucking sucks," she sings the song I Don't Want to Know.
Let me hide every truth from my eyes with the back of my hand. Let me live in a world full of lies with my head in the sand.
The melody fucking slaps, Jerry Herman always delivers, but the philosophy of it is just the worst sort of ignorance is bliss mentality. Now, to be fair, this lady is like in her 80s and doesn't have much time left to live, so I suppose we can't really begrudge her wanting to spend the last moments of her life pretending everything is fine. The issue comes when people who are neither children nor the very elderly take ignorance is bliss to heart. Climate change? No, that's not happening. That would require me to change my worldview, and that sounds uncomfortable. Systemic racism? No, that can't possibly be happening anymore. Lyndon Johnson and MLK solved racism back in the 60s. I don't need to think about that now. Systemic misogyny?
The gender pay gap is a myth. Read a book, you blue-haired pronouns haver.
Evolution? That goes against my religion. Homophobia and transphobia? That's good, actually. God hates fags. And on and on and on and on, and all of these people are able to vote. Some of these people have been voted into power and make decisions about all of your lives. There's a whole swath of the population that views ignorance as not just bliss, but a virtue. Real life, this is fine, dogs. Have you ever wondered how goddamn weird it is that we have this whole cultural touchstone in the US of jocks beating up nerds? Haha, you wanna learn things, you fucking nerd, let me shove you in a locker. Like, seriously, how did we as a society get to a point where expressing an interest in no longer being ignorant was viewed as undesirable? History is filled with instances of might makes right, of strongmen and religious fanatics destroying archives and academic institutions and murdering scholars for daring to disagree with them. You know the saying, those who can't do, teach? Allow me to counter with my own. Those who can't think, kill. Probably the most drastic case of elective ignorance in modern times followed World War II. Talk about a downer, it is far and away the most deadly conflict humanity has ever been involved in, even if you don't include the 11 million lives lost in the Holocaust. With Hitler and Tojo defeated, most of the Western world wanted to get all that nastiness behind them and return to normalcy. Thus, in the late 40s and into the 50s, there is a sudden but very noticeable conservative shift in popular culture. No longer are women being like Rosie the Riveter and working in factories, they are now now back in the home, in Pleasantville dresses, cooking and cleaning for their husband and crotch dumplings. Romance depicted in film becomes very chaste. Couples have separate beds in their bedrooms. Mom and daughter have to look on adoringly from the dishes they're washing while son and father play Battleship. Films and TV shows from the 50s would have you believe that everything in America was hunky-dory, all sprawling suburbs and laughing children as far as the eye could see. But there was still segregation, there was still gender inequality, there was still homelessness and inflation and all the other usual domestic issues, and of course the looming threat of nuclear war with the Soviet Union.
Duck and cover.
So what was Disney up to around this time? Having just shoved into theaters the scraped-together anthology that is Make Mine Music, Disney actually had a bit of time to think about what they wanted to do next. For this next outing, they turned to two-story ideas that had originally been intended for their own independent features before the studio had been drafted into making propaganda during the war. A retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk starring Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, and an adaptation of Little Bear Bongo, a short story written by Sinclair Lewis. They slapped on a couple of interstitial framing devices and called it fun and fancy-free, the third worst film in the canon. Why not the most worst? Well, Dinosaur is more boring and more devoid of color, and Home on the Range knows what it did.
Yeah, they're real.
To start with, we desecrate one of the studio's greatest masterpieces by having Jiminy Cricket host this travesty. He literally asserts the premise of the title by reading a newspaper with all sorts of awful headlines. Hey, that one about oceans swallowing all the land sounds familiar.
You know, you worry too much.
But should we worry about any of that? Nah, just shove your heads right in the sand like ostriches don't. Because that would be a stupid behavior for an animal. Just shove your ass right in the air with a sign on it saying, "Eat me," and not in the fun sex way. I get that the context is that World War II had just ended and everyone just wanted to forget about all the death, and Disney wanted to bring a little joy to people's lives. But this feels just way too on the nose. If escapism is your intent, why call attention to it like this? You're essentially reminding the audience of what they've come to the movies to forget. Jiminy then breaks into the worst sort of song, one you know is bad, but that's just catchy enough to get stuck in your head.
Don't cross a bridge or peek round the corner until you're there.
What the hell kind of lyric even is that? This is wish-level songwriting here.
That's just weak songwriting. You wrote a bad song, Petey.
Apparently this tune was originally intended for Pinocchio, but was cut. Gee, I wonder why they cut this song. One man's trash is another man's treasure isn't like a physical law of nature. Sometimes trash is just trash. Why do I hate this song, Happy-Go-Lucky Fellow, so much? Firstly, the whole happy-go-lucky worldview relies on first having a certain amount of privilege. You have to have security and wealth to be able to ignore problems. If you're poor, you can't afford to be happy-go-lucky. You have to plan for tomorrow and be constantly vigilant about sudden expenses because otherwise you lose your home or your car or you starve. If your boss comes to you with an issue that needs fixing and you tell them, "Don't worry about it, it'll be fine," you will be fucking fired. You know who doesn't worry about the consequences of their actions or the dangers of their environment? Rich fuckers like Elon Musk. Let me just buy Twitter and change its name, losing all of its brand recognition overnight. What's the worst that could happen? Secondly, this song's message is entirely counter to the entire thematic argument of Pinocchio. When Pinocchio doesn't worry about what's going to happen next, bad things happen to him. His growth as a character comes when he starts looking at things more critically, and when he starts giving a damn what happens to the people he cares about. Ignoring problems usually makes them worse. I'd like to see you whistle your way out of homelessness or prison, Jiminy. Once he's done warbling about how it's better to be the idle grasshopper rather than the hard-working ant, the cricket stumbles upon a vinyl record bearing the first major segment of this double feature, Bongo. So ordinarily, I'd want to do my due diligence and read the original story, but unfortunately, it is not available to read anywhere online, as it won't be in the public domain for another year, the Internet Archive is down, and I'm not dropping $40 to get an original copy of the magazine off of eBay. I still have student loans to pay off. Speaking of paying bills, I have set up a Patreon, so I'll just quickly shill for that. Money is required to live in our beloved capitalist hellscape, and I would be very grateful if you would give me some info in the doobly-doo. Anyway, given that all I can reasonably access right now is the summary on Wikipedia, which we should all take with several grains of salt, let's dive into Bongo. Woof! I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This segment is pretty bad. It starts off engagingly enough with Bongo working at the circus and feeling depressed about it, but as soon as he escapes into the countryside, everything comes to a screeching halt. The whole tame animal used to civilization is abruptly thrust into the wilds shtick will be done far more effectively and efficiently in The Fox and the Hound. Todd and Bongo even both try to catch a fish. It's like they were intentionally trying to remake this bit, but not bad. It doesn't help that everything is narrated, even the most obvious things.
Felt so good, he just had to run around.
Shut the fuck up, Dinah Shore. This isn't an episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
This is more than weird. This is embarrassing.
After what feels like 100 years of solitude, Bongo finally meets some other bears and quickly takes a shine to the only other bear of his stature. We then get an interminably long daydream sequence before we finally meet the villain of the piece, Lumpjaw. Watching him walk directly through trees without stopping is the most fun we're having in this half hour, so make the most of it. With his introduction, we are given the dumbest fucking misunderstanding, which is predicated on the idea that bears say I love you by slapping each other.
But a bear likes to say it with a slap.
I already docked make my music points for the spouse abuse joke and the Martins and the Coys, and that was all of 30 seconds, and this here is a 5-minute musical number. Here it is, everyone. The worst song in the entire canon. Say it with a slap.
When a whippoorwill's in love, he can whipper. All the horses neck and all the turtles snap.
Lumpjaw and Bongo then engage in fisticuffs before they both fall off a waterfall. Another bit borrowed in Fox and the Hound, weird that. And then we get our sickeningly happy ending. Bongo is trash. Bongo does not deserve a Lorcana card. Bongo must be punished for the sin of being fucking boring. I have seen this segment in full all of 3 times now. Once when I saw this movie in full for the first time, once when I made my friends watch it as a torture, and once when I rewatched it to write this script. I will have to inadvertently see bits of it in order to get the clips for this video, but after that, I never want to watch this segment again. Wikipedia tells me that the original story had the bears reject Bongo as a civilized freak, and he meekly returns to servitude in the circus, and man, that's fucking depressing. I'm guessing it's a metaphor for how capitalist society brainwashes us to the point where we can't function outside the bars of its prison.
My name is Freak.
But I don't think I really need that out of a Disney movie. Sad endings are good when they're cathartic, like Schindler's List, or bittersweet yet hopeful, like Fiddler on the Roof. But that just sounds bleak and awful. Speaking of bleak and awful, our next framing device is narrated by history's greatest monster, Edgar Bergen. Hey look, it's my profile picture. Mr. Bergen is most famous for being a radio ventriloquist, which apparently is not the oxymoron you thought it was. The transition to film was a bit of a bumpy one for him, as you can very clearly see his lips moving every fucking time. Besides his basic incompetency at his chosen profession, he's decently okay as a host, and the puppets are fun, sort of, but it is very weird that this grown-ass man is holding a birthday party for a young girl without her parents, with only his puppets for guests. Luana Patton is awfully cavalier in the face of this obvious child predator. The worst part is Bergen's introduction, where he's painted a face on his fist and made a puppet out of it. It looks awful, but the part that curdles my spleen is when he says he wants to kiss the puppet goodnight, and in the face of the horror of such intimate contact from such a creepy man, she self-evaporates. She literally chooses not just suicide, but pure annihilation without hope of afterlife, rather than get a wet smacker from the ventriloquist.
Isn't that a wonderful trick?
It is jarringly terrifying. This moment is what I imagine existential dread looks like. After some shitty vaudeville banter, Bergen... Okay, enough of that joke. Back to the stables with you. Our host starts his narration of Mickey and the Beanstalk first by explaining the concept of a fairy tale?
Now just try and imagine it. Can't you just close your eyes and see it?
Well, I can't see very good with my eyes closed. My eyelids get in the way.
Yeah, well, you create a picture in your mind's eye.
Oh.
What the fuck am I watching? Anyway, we finally get to the best part of this film, Mickey and the Beanstalk. After surviving the slog that is the rest of this movie, in comparison, Mickey and the Beanstalk is a masterpiece of animation. But to be honest, that's mostly Stockholm Syndrome. This segment out of context is merely average, but after a half an hour of a boring bear and a creepy and also shitty ventriloquist, it may as well be Shakespeare. It starts off with a banger, the song Oh What a Happy Day.
The air is sweet with clover, the clouds are turning over. Oh yes, they're turning over just to show their silver lining. My, what a happy day.
I'm almost dancing in my seat, how refreshing. And when the golden harp gets stolen, the shadowy figure that grabs her is suitably menacing. And with the kingdom experiencing a sudden and severe drought, we have actual stakes! What a concept! We get the standard Jack and the Beanstalk set up from there, though instead of a boy and his mom, it's an interspecies polycule. No judgment.
And they were roommates.
Donald goes mad with hunger and makes for the cow with an axe, but Mickey stops him, saying they'll sell it instead. And like, what do you think the person who buys it is gonna do with the cow, Mickey? More important question, who are you planning to sell the cow to? In the original fairy tale, it's just Jack and his mom who are poor and need money, so they go sell the cow to someone better off. But here, fucking everyone. Everyone! Is starving. Whom are you planning to sell this cow to? Fucking Aquaman! Apparently there's a deleted scene where Mickey takes the cow to the castle and finds Queen Minnie, who gives him the magic beans for the cow, and I guess that makes a certain amount of sense. But that's a deleted scene, so it ain't canon, so it don't matter, so I will continue to bitch about this nonsense. At any rate, Donald goes
Berserk.
And throws away the beans, leading us into the Beanstalk growing sequence, which is just lovely, well animated, and with some great music. Once up in the clouds, there are various shenanigans in and around the giant's castle, and Willie himself is a delight.
You sure you don't want a pink bunny?
Alternately comic and menacing as needed. Willie can have a Lorcana card as a treat. Our heroes rescue the harp and saw down the Beanstalk just in time for Willie to go splat in the dried up wheat fields. But we are jarringly ripped from this reverie by Baggin and his stupid puppets, one of whom is upset the giant is dead. And like, I don't understand the rationale here of not wanting to tell a story where anyone dies. Have you ever met kids? Kids are fucking bloodthirsty. They love it when bad guys kick the bucket. Our shitty ventriloquist then has to eat his words about
Just a figment of your imagination.
when Willie pulls up the roof of the house looking for Mickey and the harp. The giant then kaiju stomps around LA for a bit, and the movie mercifully ends. If that segment felt oddly familiar, but not fully, it's probably because you saw the version hosted by Ludwig von Drake, who replaced Edgar Bergen in the 60s when Disney finally realized how fucking creepy and shitty he was. Von Drake makes things marginally better, I suppose, if only in making the short fully animated rather than a hybrid with live action. And at the very least, there are no fucking puppets. Now, does this movie even uphold its own premise? Jiminy starts off with that stupid song about ignoring your problems.
You can't just make everything better by singing some stupid song!
But is that what Bongo and Mickey do? Both segments have our protagonists start off in shitty situations, then take action to remedy those situations. If Bongo had believed that ignorance was bliss, he would have compartmentalized his depression like an adult and stayed in the circus. If Mickey had believed that ignorance was bliss, he would have starved. Actually, scratch that. Donald would have killed and eaten him, which he would have deserved. Instead, Bongo takes action and leaves the shitty circus, then stands up to and fends off Lumpjaw. Mickey goes out and sells the cow, and then later rescues his friends and the harp and deals with the giant. All of this requires cognizance of your problems and looking for solutions to them rather than pretending that
everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
There's a quote attributed to Socrates: "There is only one good, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance." You can even get a placard saying it from Amazon to hang up in your living room, live, laugh, love style. While we can quibble about there being more evils, like, murder, the sentiment is nonetheless compelling. So when a movie titles itself based on the opposite of that sentiment, you can bet I'm gonna have a problem with it. And I'm not the only one. Even critics at the time hated it. John McCartan, writing for The New Yorker, said of it, "Walt Disney, who seems to have been aiming for mediocrity in his recent productions, has not even hit his mark." This film is the exact sort of banal, pointless fluff that modern critics of Disney accuse it of making. When people satirize Disney by singing, "It's a small world after all."
No, anything but that.
This is the exact sort of tripe they're referring to, which is a shame, because most of Disney's output is not like this. Fun and Fancy Free is almost uniquely saccharine and twee amongst the canon. There are precious few other entries in that catalog of more than 60 feature-length films that are as dismissible as this one. The Mickey and the Beanstalk segment is entertaining enough on its own, but even it isn't particularly groundbreaking or notable, apart from being the last time Walt Disney would voice Mickey himself. Give this one a miss, and watch The Three Caballeros or Make Mine Music instead if you're hankering for a package-era film. Now I feel I've been a little harsh. Sometimes there are problems that you just can't do anything about. Case in point, that whole threat of mutually assured nuclear annihilation I mentioned near the beginning. I cannot imagine what it was like living in either the US or the USSR during the Cold War, constantly fearing that today might be the day the bomb drops on you. In such circumstances, it doesn't benefit you to worry about it. At some point, you have to continue living your life. You have to go to work and do your chores and eat dinner and relax with your friends. Life goes on, problems or not. But that doesn't mean you're pretending they're not there. When you're given a chance to act, to fix a problem, take it! There's very little that most individuals can do to prevent climate change, but at least in the United States, on the first Tuesday in November, you have the right to pick who gets to be in charge. You get to pick who will decide whether we continue to burn fossil fuels or transition to green energy. You get to pick whether or not the leader of your city or state or nation will recognize reproductive rights or queer rights or fucking tax the fucking rich bastards who are causing all this trouble in the first place. Voting is your means of voicing your opinion on an issue, of acting on the problems of the world. And if you have a preference among the choices, then it is your moral imperative to get your ass to the polls and vote. Well, we're over halfway through the package era now. Join me next time as we slog through Melody Time. Bergen!